Hi everyone, this is Travels with an Archaeologist. I'm the archaeologist, now let's get into the travels.
So I'm coming at you today from Canada, but today's video is not on Canada. There will be at least one Canadian video in the near future, but today's video isn't on that. It's actually on the Negev. The Negev is the desert of southern Israel, and despite its reputation as a barren wasteland, there's actually a lot to see here. I've got 3 sites lined up for you in the Negev, and we're going to discuss all of them. Plus, I'm going to show you a bonus because it's not an archaeological site, but it is extraordinarily beautiful and extraordinarily cool. Today, the Negev is relatively, shall we say, modern. However, historically speaking, this has been a place of harsh nomadic lifestyles, a trade route, and a place of quiet contemplation. Even today, it's largely inhabited and traversed by the nomadic Bedouin people, a predominantly, but not exclusively, Arab Islamic shepherding people who have made their living out of this harsh terrain for millennia. Now, we don't know much on the origin of the Bedouins, but we do know that there have been nomads living in the desert for as long as there have been records to speak of them. Now, let's start with our bonus site. This is Makhtesh Ramon, which is often translated as crater, but actually formed by an ancient ocean from the late Triassic, but exposed by the geological erosion of softer sediments occurring sometime around the Pliocene. Located in the middle of the Negev, it is currently a protected area for its natural significance, which sees exposed colors of the rock and creating a natural beauty. It's being used as a trade route and occasional shelter for the Bedouin on their travels. A Makhtesh is a unique landform similar to the Badlands of North America in terms of geologic formation processes, but the exact landform is unique to the Negev and the Sinai, making this a must-see for geology enthusiasts. Okay, fine, I admit it, we're rock nerds. Happy now? There is a town here called Makhtesh Ramon, however, and this is a recent addition to the landscape built in 1951. It seems to have been built to house highway workers, today with a population of about 5,000, but I'd be lying if I said I did any real in-depth research into this city in particular. Still, if you're in the area, do check out the Makhtesh. But it's time we move on to our actual archaeology. The only way to get to the Levant from Egypt is through Gaza, unless that is you wish to cross the desert. And very few people really wanted to do that, aside from the nomads and the spice traders. The Negev, as a result, remained relatively free from ownership, even from those who claimed to own it. In the time of the Bible, it was home to the Edomites, who had dwelt here since before the dawn of history, and this brings us to our first site, Arad. Arad is a very fun site to see because you can see all of its occupations. The Edomites, or rather their predecessors, founded it in the early Bronze Age, and you can still see so much early Bronze Age architecture here. This was built and founded in the 3rd millennium BCE, almost as old as the pyramids. To put it in perspective, Julius Caesar was as far away from the founding of Arad as his death is from today. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'm keeping it. This shows an impressive state-level society already living in the Negev 1,000 years before written history begins in this region. This house is a reconstruction based on other archaeologists' best guesses based on the remains, so you can see it's built both for shade and to allow a breeze. The Iron Age phase is indeed biblical from a period when Judah conquered this region. It's highlighted by this citadel and temple, which is one of the few original biblical-era temples still standing, giving you a real glimpse of original Old Testament worship areas. It also contains this shrine where they burnt offerings. Interesting, one of the things they burned here may have been cannabis, according to a study published in 2020. Although there is some evidence of long-term habitation here, this probably would have been a military garrison for the most part, used to exert authority, which meant Judean presence here would ebb and flow with the power the kingdom was able to exert. Tel Arad did also later come to house a Roman garrison, which is a fun place to wander around, and you can see the Roman storage and barracks, both of which were later used for a short-lived Arab occupation, but the Arab one was never very big. You might be expecting me to say that this was the former Edomite capital, or some great hidden city, but no. In fact, quite the opposite. And to me, that's what makes it special. Great capitals tend to get rebuilt by new generations and razed by enemies, but here, in this little rural village, this gives you a real true glimpse into the lives of everyday people in the Bronze Age. This was only ever a small village, and that's what makes it such a worthwhile visit. Now obviously the biblical cities and ancient Hebrew lands did start to take root. Archaeologists are divided on exactly when the unified kingdom arose, or if indeed it even existed, but Hebrew presence in the region began to appear in the Iron Age approximately 1200 BC. This was when Egypt pulled out of its holdings in the Levant following the Bronze Age collapse. Long story, I'll talk about it in another video. New local states and kingdoms began to emerge. 2 of these were the biblical kingdoms. But exactly how far south did the unified kingdom, later Judah, extend exactly? Well, that brings us to site number 2, Sheba. The southern extent of Judah is somewhat contested, but the constant city referenced in the texts is Sheba. and we can safely say that this city marks the southern end of Judah's authority, acting as a center of government for the surrounding region. Beersheba is ancient Hebrew for 7 wells, although only about 4 have been found for certain. The presence of water made this city an obvious choice as a center for authority in the Negev. Even modern-day Beersheba is Israel's largest city south of this line. Unlike Arad, this city definitely had a sizable civilian population, and it was most likely culturally Judean. And we can see the marks that come with it. This site, despite being very small, clearly had a lot of funding and development going for it, even in ancient terms. This site was continuously inhabited from the Bronze Age until the Persian period, when the city falls out of the records, and obviously remains inhabited in a different location to this day. These ancient house plans show that there was a sizable population here. You can see one of the cisterns which allowed for the storage of water, indeed one of these 4 known wells, and look at how big it is. Water was a big theme in Beersheba, and it's got a lot going for water engineering and water movement. This city was well prepared for a civilian population in a drought and to supply their soldiers in a siege. And it was needed, because they weren't alone out here. And this brings us to, you guessed it, site number 3. And this is a 2-for-1, Avdat and Mamshit, and I'm combining them because what can be said about one can be said about the other. But, full disclosure, almost all of these pictures are from Avdat. I did not quite get to reach Mamshit myself, but these 2 cities are, again, insanely cool. These were not affiliated in any way with the Bible, but are in fact a product of the nomadic Arab tribe known as the Nabateans. These people probably didn't arise until about the 8th century BCE, if not later, known for domesticating the camel and trading spices. Now, you can learn a lot more about the Nabateans in my Petra video, but as to these sites in particular, they're known for one thing: wine. Yes, you heard me right, wine, in the desert. Nabateans themselves were known for the spice trade, but here in the Negev, we see them growing their own grapes for wine production. Here's Avdat's largest wine press. They'd put the grapes in this section, press them, and it would flow into huge quantities into a barrel below. But how did they get the grapes here in the first place, you say? Well, excellent question, and we do have an answer. Outside of Avdat are a series of terraces built to catch rainwater. While rain is not common in the Negev, it does occur. And when it does, the Nabateans knew how to take advantage of it. They had incredibly sophisticated water systems on par with the Romans several hundred years later, and collected rainwater in huge cisterns and along these terraces, which allowed for vine growth. Making their own wine was just one more thing the Nabateans did to diversify their trade, and it's no wonder, with this incredible engineering, that the Nabateans had attracted the attention of Rome. Rome ultimately conquered these 2 cities and built their ruins here, and as you can see, they really stand out. Most of the surviving site is Roman, with bathhouses and fortifications, although the population was never very big, neither from the Nabateans nor the Romans. Christianity took hold very swiftly in the Near East, and we can see this Byzantine church signaling that Christianity took root here. These churches are still some of the best preserved in the Byzantine world, precisely because they've been living out here in the desert, abandoned in small cities. And the Arabs conquered it as well in the 7th century. However, an earthquake less than 100 years later led to both cities' abandonment, and they've sat relatively untouched ever since. And that's about it for the Negev. The Negev is full of fascinating finds, and the desert itself is beautiful. It's not the dead land that it initially appears, and although it is harsh, there is life, there is change, and there is history. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel, and you can donate to my Patreon in the link in the description below. Until next time, I'm the Archaeologist, and this has been The Travels.